you know, we still need the stories, whether we read modern novels or not. It's like, we need that connection, whether it's with our elders or with our kids. We pass these stories on as something precious. For me personally, it's probably just the unknown. I've always been drawn more to the unknown and whatever the beyond of normal life. So I would actually go out and look for these. We would go to haunted houses. We would go to haunted areas of the cities, see what was going on. Yeah. Now, whatever that comes from, I don't know, but it kept life interesting.
It was almost like an escape.
Definitely an escape. Family life was not a happy life, so that was an escape. Oh, definitely.
Hey, welcome to the Floaties for Krakens podcast. I am your host, Camille Maria Costa, and it is a brilliant day to be monstrous. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Floaties for Krakens podcast, season 2, episode 8. Hi. Happy spring. I'm going to just keep saying that, I think, for the rest of this season because I'm so excited that it's spring. Anyway, how are you? How you doing? How's life? How's everything? Are you eating? Are you drinking water? Have you watched any good monster films lately? If you have, go ahead and drop them down below because I would love to watch something great. Or book recommendations. Do that too. Here we are. End of March. You got here. You made it here, folks. And I'm so happy that you are here with us today. I am thrilled about this episode. It is so stellar. It is so cool. And I learned so freaking much just in this episode alone. And again, we're in some very just fun, spooky believability territory today. And I'm just so excited for you to see Daisy Ahlstone's episode. In Daisy's own words, Daisy Ahlstone, they, them, is a folklorist studying environmental storytelling through the lens of folklore, eco-criticism, post-humanism, and community-engaged methodologies. They are interested in the ways legend, extinction, material culture, metaphor, and community interact. Daisy also collaborates on several folklore and community-centered projects, including the Livelihoods Knowledge Exchange Network, the Western States Folklore Society, and, a little YouTube and Twitch streaming channel called Folkwise. Literally the best show out there, okay? It is so amazing. I'm gonna link it all. They're amazing people. Every single individual that works there. I love Folkwise. Shout out. This show, by the way, approaches the study of tradition non-traditionally. Freaking brilliant. I first met, I don't know if Daisy remembers this. I first met the magical, lovely individual that is Daisy a couple years ago at my very first folklore academic conference, which was at The Ohio State University. Daisy, I do not know if you remember that. I met you, and you were one of the kindest people I had ever met, and you were so sweet, and you sat in on our papers, and it was just so nice. Dude, you're literally gonna change the world, and your research is so cool, and you just talk about such amazing, important stuff that people should be talking about, and I'm just so thankful that somebody finally is. You're so cool, and the platforms you're making, not only in the folklore field academically, but in Folkwise, and just, you're brilliant, and I'm just so freaking thankful that I was able to talk to you on this show. And come back anytime you want. The door's open, the window's open, whatever you want. Come on back. But yeah, this is gonna be a really fun episode, I think, for you all. You're gonna learn a lot, because I did. But yeah, I guess I am rambling. Here we go. Ladies and cuttlefish, let me introduce to you letters of rec for Thylacines. Well, hi, Daisy.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm eating a snack, drink my coffee.
Good.
I'm here.
What are you eating?
I'm eating a peanut butter bagel.
Yum.
Is that weird?
No.
Okay.
No, it is not.
I grew up eating oh my god, you'll maybe get a kick out of this, but so I grew up in Southern California, and
yes.
I'm a big fan of peanut butter tortillas, PBTita as I call them, because that's what we ate as a snack. Like, we could do a peanut butter sandwich, but we also got a lot of peanut butter tortillas. I just think that was a very like Southern California thing. Peanut butter tortilla.
Your life will be changed when you put peanut butter and or jelly. I've done both.
Yeah.
Made a little PB&J out of a tortilla.
Yeah.
And it
seriously
changes your life.
Yeah, it's changed your life. Yeah. Do you roll it up like a little tube?
I try.
You try?
I toast it.
Oh, you toast them? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I do it like a quesadilla or something. But, yeah, but it's just like peanut butter. Yeah, I don't know. That's a very like Americanized snack. Like, I don't know. I feel
delicious.
like it, but so good. Yeah, because the peanut butter, it's like, it's the perfect blend of different worlds and different, kind of communities that come together to make these little unique snacks. Like, who else eats PB-titas? Like, Europe would never.
I also love that name, PB-titas.
I call it PB-tita because it's like, it's a tortilla, but tita, I don't know, it's just PB-tita.
It's brilliant.
That's what I call PB-tita.
You need to make a company right now.
PB-tita.
I'd buy you out. So
they're good. Okay, people who are listening who are like in a tortilla, I will admit most of the time there are flour tortillas, but I've done it with a corn tortilla before. Does make a difference. But
100%.
They're both
having a gluten allergy.
Oh yeah,
corn.
Yeah,
delicious.
Yeah. Corn is.
Anyway,
I was gonna say corn's underrated, but that's actually not true. I think it is very well rated presently.
Very well rated.
I think corn is accurately rated high.
And it should be even more rated, I think. I think sky high.
Yeah, there's so many. You know what is underrated? All of the species of corn. The lack that there's like one species of corn that everyone's like, that's highly rated. Okay, true. But what's underrated is the complexity and so many different species of corn that make up all of these tasty, delicious, like, I don't know, things to put snacks upon. Like, so good. Whether it's a tortilla or anything you can make, just including the vast array of beautiful native corns. That's what's underrated.
No joke, Daisy. It is my dream to get like these black and white corn stalks like on my hands as tattoos. It has been my dream for a long time. I love corn. I'm glad you understand.
I understand. Corn and rice. Honestly, corn and rice. Corn and grasses make the world go round.
Oh yeah, that's the only reason I'm here today. So,
yeah, truly.
Thank you. Shout out to corn.
Yeah, shout out to corn.
Not sponsored, but I really wish if anybody who's in charge of corn would like to sponsor.
Give me some heirloom corn. Give me some blue corn.
Popcorn. I'll take it.
Popcorn.
I'll take it. Anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know you grew up in SoCal. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ventura, which is like a little north of LA. It's like maybe an hour and a half north of LA or something like that. Yeah. Kind of an LA burb, but on the coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you live there?
17 years. I lived there my whole growing up life. Yeah. I was freshly stock. I don't know. I'm trying to make a corn metaphor. I was born and raised there. And then I moved away for school basically. And I visit, but,
sure.
But I haven't lived there since I was 17. But, so
no wonder you have a brilliant taste in food.
It's like 10 years, but yeah, I miss a lot. Like, I've lived in some places. Okay, Columbus is like okay for food, Columbus, Ohio, but I lived in Utah, and boy, were we suffering. I know that's biased. I wasn't in Salt Lake. I know Salt Lake is good food. Okay, don't come for me, but like,
It's real though when you come from such a vast variety of
Yeah, when I
delicious
get
yumminess.
spoiled, when I was spoiled with just like every kind of food I ever wanted,
Ever,
just like
ever.
living on the coast, just like every people are there, every type of food is there, like you
Yes.
just get whatever you want. There's fresh fish and things like that, but
Oh, of
um
course. There's everything. All
yeah,
good, all yummy.
strawberry capital of the world. That's where I grew up next to. Yeah. I know. I miss
Yay!
going to the
The
strawberry
strawberry
festival in
festival.
Oxnard. Yeah.
That's
I miss Ventura
wild.
County. Yeah.
That's
I
so
know.
cool,
I
Daisy. I
do
had
I
no
do have
idea.
I do have a memory, like a very distinct memory of in Ventura there's a harbor, there's like a coastal harbor, and then like on the other side of the sort of cross street to go to the harbor is a huge strawberry field. And in the middle of a strawberry field is like what I imagined as some kind of like throughway walkway, maybe for the farm workers, but it sort of became a bike path that was like they put concrete on it, and there's like sort of a fence on either side, so you can't go in the field,
Yeah.
but I don't know, there's like a weird secret trail. And
Yeah.
whenever the strawberries would bloom, I had a friend who lived like on the other side of it, so a handful of times I would like go on that path. And whenever the strawberries were like in bloom, they were getting a harvest season, you could smell the
Oh my
sweetness of the
gosh.
berries like in the soil growing like right
Oh
there.
my god.
That makes me miss Southern California. That's what I miss
Yeah.
about Southern California is
That's your
like
core memory.
those. That's like a core memory of like, damn, like I was also maybe one of the first times where I just like had a very sensory, like a distinct moment where I was like smelling something that was just part of the environment around me. Now, obviously, salt water, stinky fish water,
Oh,
those
sure.
smells all come to me too.
Comes with the territory. Yeah.
But like you don't smell, strawberries every day. You only do it at like the
No.
peak of their, ripeness basically. And I remember just being like, whoa, like that's a strawberry. It was
Yeah.
kind of cool.
And how
But,
stunning to look at too. Like,
oh yeah, they're like
oh,
little gems. They're
so
like little, just a sea of shiny
yeah.
gems, and they're so shiny. Yeah,
Right. There I don't
yeah,
think I've ever picked or seen a fresh strawberry before. I need to
yeah,
go. Because that sounds
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. They're just so bright and shiny. And
Oh, I
when they
love
get
it.
big, they get like like little gems. They just look
Yeah.
like so beautiful. But
Yeah.
they're also like totally. The really big strawberries are totally like milked for all their worth, as in they're in the perfect climate in the world. They have the best soil conditions, and then they have all of this like best soil conditions, air quotes I guess, but
Sure,
they're
sure.
pumped with all kinds of nutrients. They're given the full range of sun as much as they can, so they get like really big and really sweet.
Oh, that
They're so
sounds
good. I actually,
incredible.
that's one thing I still do. Every time I go to the grocery store, I look to see where the strawberries are from, what county they're from, because most of the time they're from California,
Yeah.
because it's like the strawberry capital of the world, basically. But
Right.
not always,
Right.
not always. But I do always look to see if they're from Ventura County, or sometimes they're from like Santa Monica County or something, or where, not Santa Monica
Sure.
County, whatever. They're from like another they're from somewhere else, but sometimes I look and I'm like, is it my county? If it's my county, I will buy them.
That's so awesome. It's your
That's
little
like the
piece of
one.
home.
That's like the one place that like Ventura has any relevance to Ohio.
Is there strawberries?
There's strawberries sometimes, yeah, rarely.
That's so cute. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
That's so crazy. Yeah, I did not
Mhm.
know. I did not know
Yeah,
you had roots there.
Mhm.
That makes so
Mhm.
much sense in my mind
Yeah.
now.
Now you're like, oh, you are kind of Californian, aren't you?
Totally Californian.
Yeah.
Totally West. Like it all
People
makes
wonder.
a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
people like. I think they don't know that, and then they're like, "Oh, you're from the West Coast. That makes a lot of sense." I don't know what it's like. One of those like I don't know affects of
Yeah.
having a place you lived in for forever growing up. But
It's part of you. Yeah.
yeah, I still
Well,
also put a
tell
still also put a the in front of any highway name, like unconsciously. Like somebody will like I don't think about it at all until somebody pointed it out to me, and then now I can't like unsee it, but I do it
right.
anyway. I'll say like, okay, what are we taking? Are we taking the 670 or the 71? And they're like,
Oh,
why'd you say the? Like, I could say it like that fast because it is an entity. I do think that there's something like psychologically in Southern California or Californians in general that say the before the highway name because of how the highways and the freeways have taken on like an identity. Like they have a characteristics and a personality and sort of an identity, and to give them a proper noun is to make them a the is like funny.
They
I
are
don't know.
beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That's like, so funny.
I do that too.
You know, and I'm
like,
not originally from California. I lived there for a while, but I'm from Southwest Texas.
Yeah.
And so I know exactly what you mean because we do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm also realizing now, because I've heard you do this before, because I do the same thing, is like when you are trying to agree or say something, you say like, or disagree, you're like, yeah, no.
Oh, yeah, no, and no,
like,
yeah.
No, or no, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes, this is totally a thing. I saw like a meme like document the different, explanations of the frameworks. No, yeah means yes, and yeah, no means no, and like whatever it is. Yeah, I think that's
we didn't make the rules. That's just how we talk.
That's just culture, baby. That's just culture, baby.
Culture. Just culture. Read about it, everyone.
Read about it. Oh yeah,
that's crazy. Okay, so then tell everyone about yourself, Daisy. What brought you from SoCal to this world of folklore in Columbus?
So well, that's where I grew up, and I left for school. I went to University of Oregon for my undergraduate degree, which is a Bachelor of Arts in Folklore. And I went because I figured I could pretty much go to any school because I wanted to do psychology. You can basically do that anywhere. But I think what I was trying to do was answer questions about why people do that thing, which is what you could do. You could ask that in any field, I guess. Why do people do the thing? But what I took a folklore class taught by Dr. Lisa Gilman my freshman year, and I was like, oh, this is what I was trying to study the whole time. Why people do the weird thing, or why people do the super mundane thing. Like, why do people do the normal thing? And what is normal? And so that was what started opening those questions and those doors for me. So I went to University of Oregon for a couple years. I got my Bachelor of Arts degree, and then I took a year off, and then I went back to school in Utah State University for their master's degree program in folklore, which was amazing. I dunked on Utah earlier, but Utah,
just their food, okay,
just the food, just the food. Utah is a very interesting place. I basically told myself I could live anywhere for 2 years, and I did, and it was great, and I met amazing people, and I learned amazing things. And then after that, I moved to Columbus, Ohio, with the hopes that I would get into Ohio State University, but I technically moved before then, and I did get into the school. And
period.
I was like, I had my like test round of my master's degree program, which I tell everybody that they should do if you get funding for it, you should do a master's first, only because it's basically a 2 to at most 3 year commitment. It's like you're in, you're out, and if you hate it, it's not as long as a PhD program. And
good point.
It's not as like psychologically taxing. I mean, it's not taxing, but
of course,
you have there's less like determinism about where you'll end up. You have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more like way to figure out who you are and what you want to do, and then you can decide if you really want to do a PhD or not. And I wanted to, because I am that type of broken brain, I guess. That's what I say. Everybody who gets a PhD has some thing. They have to like because you have to be like intrinsically, or there needs to be some pressure on you that is very unique to want to do a PhD program, because most of the time you don't need to be a successful person and to live your life. So you have to want to pursue a particular thing, or be motivated by the universe or by somebody to help you like along that journey. But so I ended up in Columbus, and I've been living here for almost 5 years. I moved here at the end of 2019. So
right before pandemic.
COVID. Yeah, it was whack.
Wow.
Yeah, and I adjuncted, and that was a whole thing.
Oh boy.
During that time, yeah. But
holy moly.
yeah, and my PhD program started in fall 2020, so it was like I've
Oh
basically
boy.
been in school for the whole pandemic. But anyway, I'm getting there. We're almost out. So but that's why I'm here, and now I'm sort of like in the job market, and I'm writing, and feeling, I don't know, like I'm isolated in the last push of senioritis, but I'm there. We're writing.
Yes. when do you defend, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm in that like I'm in a sort of like what was communicated to me as a striking zone. So like I'm
okay.
There's sort of, it's a little bit dependent upon jobs. So like if I get a job, or if I'm getting interviews, they might need me to have a PhD by, let's say, the end of May.
Gotcha.
But if I don't get it, then I could, like I can write so that I am ready to defend by the end of May. Or I could be writing so I'm good to defend at the end of May, but then realize I actually have a little bit more time. So I think it will be at the latest the end of summer 2024. But right now I'm scheduled for the last week of May to defend. So
great.
Yeah, so I think I'll be I'm working on it. Yeah.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All your hard work for years. Like it's exciting, Daisy. It's really exciting.
It feels strange.
I'm sure.
It feels have I been working that hard for that? I guess I have. Oh my god. Okay, there it is. Yeah. I guess I have been doing that.
There it is.
Yeah, culminating here, but anyway.
Can you please tell us what your research is?
Yes. So my dissertation is on the trope of community as it is used in the field of folklore.
Love it.
So I'm looking at the different ways that community has been used either to define the boundaries of research subjects. So how many people are involved, what community, and then how does that include or exclude certain populaces, including non-humans. So like this would be like animals, plants, fungus, whatever other things make up and influence your ability to do folklore, to have community in the first place. So my dissertation looks at sort of a history or the story of community as it works within the discipline of folklore, but then also the following chapters are like little deep dives into either a theoretical model or a case study or a method that uses a sort of definition of community that I am creating, which is sort of community is seen as a process instead of community seen as a boundary. I know people are already working towards that anyway, but I'm trying to like apply that idea of, okay, if we were to imagine community as a process, how would that affect our work in XYZ, research practice or whatever. So that is what I'm writing about. So there's like a case study chapter on mycelial methods of an organization called Lichen that I work for, the Livelihoods Knowledge Exchange Network. They're really cool. It's run by Betsy Taylor and Mary Hufford, who are great environmental folklorists. And so that's like one example. They use a model of like mycelium network structures, or like the way that mushrooms grow, to sort of like as a metaphor for the networking that folklorists do within communities, as well as supporting community knowledge first, like from the ground, that is then redistributed between other institutions and things like that. So they sort of serve as a liaison between like big organizations like the USDA, for example, and then to community organizers who are doing things like mapping local waterways, access to clean water in places where there's not a lot of access to clean water, stuff like that, within the Appalachian region broadly. Sure. So like that's one chapter, and then another chapter is like on a theory called wild systems theory, and how that relates to like how ontologically understanding what a human is and what that means if we like move towards a systems kind of view of communities and humans and our relationships to each other from like literally like a cognitive science standpoint, and how that affects the way that we create, or the necessity for humans to create and participate in folklore, but what it might mean for, if everything is like parts of these collective systems that are influencing each other, like how does that account for non-humans, you know, like what influence do they have in the creation, and then what boundaries are then placed on the research of folklorists. Anyway, so these are like questions I'm trying to answer as best I can. And yeah, I'm thinking a lot about like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to create? What does it mean to have community? What does it mean to participate? Those sorts of questions. So it's a lot.
Wild. That's
it's
so
a lot.
Cool.
I hope it will make more sense once it is all written down.
Oh, it makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Like, I am
Okay.
so excited. I would love to read that when you're done with it. Because
yeah, totally. I mean, it's one of those things that like I'm like reading and looking at it so much that I'm like losing the meaning. It's like when you say a word a bunch of times, it starts to sound like not like a real word. I feel like I'm getting at that point. But
which is fair.
That probably tells me about the end of that means I'm ready to be done. I think is like I'm circling back and finding myself again and stuff. So
holy crap, that is so cool. Like I am so like that is just so cool. I would have never thought about any of those concepts before, and I think they are so necessary, and people need to be talking about these things. And I think it's so cool.
Yeah, I think folklorists need to think about if I don't know, the sort of paradigm shift between systems theory and the folkloric process, or just a sort of systems theory approach to research and community in general. How does that actually look in practice in the field of folklore, and in what ways have we tried to do that but have not had a framework to do it? So they're like these sort of independent claims or ideas about it. Like I'm sort of trying to bring those ideas together to say, like, if we were to create a methodology for somebody to actually find, live by, research with, whatever, here is maybe a place where all of that information is concentrated, so that then a person who's interested in doing community engaged work as a folklorist, or who has questions about the folklore in communities that they find themselves attached to, but they want to move in the direction of, you know, broadening our understanding of what it means to relate to the world and to care about the world and to have a relationship with the more than humans of our world, or the land, for example. Like, how do you consider the land as a participant in the research process or in the facilitation of folklore? Like, if we didn't have a land to share, whether that be literally the natural environment or the building that you house the event at, how are you including that being, entity, whatever, as a necessary component to the practice of your folklore, but also honoring them as a participant in that too? So like, I don't know, I hope to see more zero waste folklore events, for example. Like, how are we honoring, or how are we like thinking about the way that we use the land? And it's not necessarily to say the land is an agent per se in like our ability to do or not do a thing. Like, I mean, maybe you can make that argument, but more importantly, like, how are we recognizing the contribution that the land, for example, is making to this space, or that the pets are making to the space, or that whatever, you know, whatever the community is, you know, or the, you know, I'm interested in eastern hellbender salamanders and conservation. So like, how is the salamander, by, you know, working alongside, or how are biologists working with this animal able to rhetorically have a conversation about the water quality, you know, indices, whatever, in Appalachia, because eastern hellbender salamanders are really good water quality indicators, which is not an idea. Good water quality is not something that most people associate with Appalachia, right? Like, they associate extraction. And so to have sites of eastern hellbender success or conservation or whatever, because there's a sort of sense of local pride in that community for their ecological intervention, or not, or whatever. It just opens up that conversation, which I think is interesting. So how do we then serve, how do we do justice, how do we give back to the beings that are allowing us to, in collaboration, take care of the place that we all come from?
How do you listen?
Yeah. How do you listen to, you know, the trees on your daily walk that keep you alive because you have decided that being outside every day is really good for your mental health? Like,
right.
That means something, you know, and how do you honor that relationship? And it's not to say that they're like the be all end all of that relationship, or that the humans don't have a unique contribution to that is not important. It obviously is, but that if we're looking at this as a sort of constant flow of community in and out, and a sort of system of influence, like how would we actually talk about that in the study of folklore? So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to say this is how we might talk about that. So
we'll cool, Daisy. That's
yeah.
brilliant.
That's I don't know.
So
I hope
it is. It's, oh my gosh. And so
I find it fun to talk about.
Yeah.
I hope that what ends up coming from this is something that's practical and that makes people think differently about the way that they enact or like put into action the relationships that they have with the range of community members in their experiences, whether that's research experiences, personal experiences, whatever. Not that they're that different, but
I'm sure. I mean, forget like practical. What you just said is brilliant.
Yeah.
and
dang.
It's really crazy. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like the fact that you find it like that you're passionate about it, and you find it to be, you know, needing of a pedestal. Like, people need to be talking about this. That's practical in itself. Like, I don't know. I think people will be so moved and so excited to be using this work
I hope so.
in their own research, or like you said, like in other conferences, for example, or just other places.
Yeah. All I really care about is helping people think that more things are possible. So whether that be, you know, you could denounce like, well, I don't know if it's possible to include trees in my research. Okay, well, what if it is? And what does it look like if it is? You know, so I'm sort of I'm interested in opening letting people see that asking questions about what is possible is a useful and very important exercise for how we are going to take care of ourselves in the future, considering we're actively living in an apocalypse. So we need to all take time and like saying, okay, what is possible? What could be possible? How could we, you know, make possible these ideas? What do we, and it's not just imagining them, but like if we were to make them actionable, what would that look like? So I'm very invested in saying, well, let's do an experiment. Is this possible? Is it possible to see, you know, a non-humans as active, important participants of different degrees within the cultivation or the, I don't know, sustainability, folklore, whatever. Not that that's my favorite word, but the sustainability rather. But you know, whatever, in the proliferation of our folk activity, what are the things that are making it difficult for us to continue the tradition, rather than why is the tradition dying? I think those are important questions for folklorists to ask today, considering the discipline is founded on this kind of preservationist model of you know, things are dying, must collect, must save, for people and for the community. Not that that's not a very noble goal, but the relationship that has to settler colonialism, to racism, to ideas about what certain types of knowledge are seen as valuable, like all of these sorts of big systemic questions that influence and guide a lot of the work of higher education, and folklorists who are at the forefront of connection with community in action. We are in a really good position to be able to address that issue of our, or at least rectify the sort of, maybe not rectify, but have a conversation about the history of preservation, and how as a discipline, if we want to, you know, be the change of community, you know, help our communities, how should I say this, like, if folklorists as networkers and facilitators of the artistic and creative expressions of our communities, whatever that looks like, if we want those traditions to be able to be sustained or to change and evolve as they would naturally, or whatever, over time, organically maybe is a better way, but there's inhibitants, or there's things that are in the way of making those traditions happen, which is why folklorists end up as advocates a lot of time for communities, for better or for worse. don't focus so much about on what we're losing and what we're, you know, not gonna have because of the changes that are either environmental, global, systemic, whatever. Think about acknowledging those changes and how we might create an opportunity for them to continue, or for them to change and adapt to the impending ever-changing elements of our environments that make possible those folkloric expressions in the first place. So you know, instead of, I mean, I really like Emily Hilliard's visionary folklore in Appalachia.
Great book.
Yeah, Making Our Future. And that book is great because it kind of opens that direction. And I don't think that I think she's on the forefront, but not unique in the discipline, noticing that there's a sort of change that's moving away from this kind of like, what are we losing? What are we losing? What are we losing? How do we preserve it? How do we keep it here? Rather than what could our folklore evolve into? What could it become that would be even more nourishing for our communities? What traditions do we need to let go, you know, to make room for better and more, you know, inclusive whatever traditions? So I think it's like a mindset shift that is happening in the discipline, and I want to be part of demonstrating that it is possible to put in action these ideas about the future, or about how we have responsibility, or about, you know, leaving bad traditions behind. You know, like that's okay.
There's nothing wrong with it.
This is not always about saving tradition. Sometimes it's about adaptation, which is the conservatism and dynamism inherently embedded in folklore, but also in the concept of tradition. If you're not you know, open to changing traditions like a little bit over time, that's not to say your stuff doesn't stay the same, but if it stays the same all the time, that's not dynamic. That's just that's conservatism. That's oppression. You know, if you don't let 100%. There's room to breathe, right?
And grow.
So.
And again, listen.
listen
to everything around you.
When the world is screaming.
Yeah.
You know,
it's pretty
you gotta
rough.
listen. The world is screaming. It's easier to listen more than ever. You know?
Yeah, actually.
The last, like, you know, at least 60 years, I don't know, maybe more. People have been screaming for a long time, but really right now, you know, like if you're not hearing the screams, you're
not listening.
Actively avoiding them.
Yeah.
You're hiding from them. You're not like, you're just not going outside anymore. Anyway.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that's brilliant, Daisy. And I think, oh my gosh, I think you have such a gem of research here. And I think it's going to be so great. And I know it's stressful, and I know so much is happening just to cross that finish line. But I'm glad that you have that passion and that motivation to do it, because it's going to take you very far, I think.
I mean, you can tell when I talk about it, I get excited.
Which is great.
I still get excited about it. I just like, I'm just like, is this exciting to other people? It's also like very, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to like vent a little bit about just what it is, because it's hard to, you know, find space to talk about it, and to, you know, have people hear you, you know, talking about listening. You know? It's a scalable activity to listen.
It's hard. It's a hard thing. And I mean, I think, well, I don't think it's that hard when you have such great, passionate research. So I think it's going to be wonderful. And it's going to be lovely.
Thanks.
And I know you're unbelievably busy, and you're doing XYZ, you're doing all these things. You also do a little show called Folkwise, don't you?
Yeah, I love.
What is that?
Folkwise is keeping me alive. I swear to God. No, it's so Folkwise is it's a, I don't know. Sometimes they say it's like a brand, sometimes they say it's an organization, but basically it's so myself with a team of other folklorists got together in 2020, like a lot of people did, to sort of change how we understand and how we have conversations about folklore. So we noticed that a lot of conversations about the field of folklore, the discipline of folklore, most of the time when a new student, like in an introduction to folklore class, they enter the class, they go like, you could study that? Because it's not that, it's not a very like non-academic or like public conversation about what folklore is or why it's important to us or whatever. So this team, we got together and sort of created I don't know, social media brand called Folkwise, but primarily we're a Twitch stream and a YouTube channel. And we stream live on Twitch every Tuesday night from 7 to 11 p.m. a show called Folkwise Live, which involves usually a guest who is either a folklorist, an artist, a musician, somebody who's interested in traditional arts and culture and heritage studies. And they come on our show. We play a video game together that is thematically connected to either them as an individual or to their research. And then we talk a little bit about it. They notice and wonder about the game. They sort of highlight some of the elements of folklore, traditional arts, and culture that we might study as folklorists within the game. And then we cut the game and do a formal interview with them. And then those interviews get posted on YouTube. We also have a handful of video essays that we've done. And sort of like small projects like that, but primarily we are a Twitch stream that centers folklore, hopefully, and we study tradition non-traditionally is what we like to say. So we try to decenter academia from conversations, like from sort of being a space of those conversations, and say, like, let's put them where the people are. The people are already talking about traditional art because it's something we all do, whether we're conscious of it or not, or whether we call it traditional art or not, we're all doing something like that. So we thought, why not, you know, use a platform to our advantage to have those conversations. And Twitch happens to be sort of like public access TV, except that the lingua franca or whatever, the primary form of communication is video games. So we're sort of using that to our advantage to open up some of these conversations. But I like to think it's a very humanizing experience for the people we interview. Okay, yeah, as a past guest yourself. Yes.
It is incredibly, I mean, you all, like, I just really think... Fun. You, Dom, your internet sleuths, your clan, everybody in that world is just so kind and so amazing, and you all make everything so, like you said, accessible.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those kids that like I accidentally took a folklore class, and I was like, what the hell, you can do this? Like, I didn't know. And for the longest time felt a little stupid. You know, when I first started taking classes, I was like, I can't retain this as quickly as I wish I could have years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like your platform is so easily approachable because it's like we are talking. It is. We are talking about these very important things, but through the guise of a video game, a conversation, right? Like it's brilliant. It's such a great show. Everybody go subscribe.
Come watch it. No, come hang out with us. Yeah. I mean, the fun part for me about Twitch, or the reason we chose that as a platform in part, is that you can create community while you're talking about community at the same time. So just be, you know, we didn't force it or anything. We just happened to study community and study informal traditional culture. So when we're interviewing people, you know, like at the same time, there's people who are asking actual questions live of the guests that we have on our show. But equally as important, I think, is that people are having side conversations within our live stream chat. So they're like commenting in the back, you know, about the side, you know, what we're wearing, or about a meme or something, or like some kind of, you know, sort of there's sort of a meta culture that happens. So we sort of have our own channel Folklore now, which is also really cool for us as people who are interested in traditional arts and culture, because it shows that we have a community and that is really the one of the special parts of being able to do Folkwise, is like how we're able to connect with people in just like everyday ways. Like most of the time when an academic gets interviewed, it's like very highly structured and they don't get to like be silly at all, or they don't, or that they're highly discriminated in terms of like what their qualifications are to even be interviewed in the first place or something. Our channel is very much like, we want to interview as many people as possible who are thinking deeply about traditional arts and culture, whether they're an artist themselves or an academic or whatever, and at any stage of scholarship, or, you know, there's not really a big bar to entry other than some kind of dedicated interest in analyzing the traditional arts and culture of everyday life. So whether that means you're a storyteller, an artist, or an academic folklorist, you can be on our show. You know, so we have had a lot of ethnomusicologists actually recently too. A lot of music people, which has been really fun because there's a lot of great, you know, video game music.
Absolutely. And again, that's such a beautiful medium to be talking about this stuff and teach people about what you know your guests do, what you all do.
We try to ask questions we try to ask questions that like both are that demonstrate that not everybody in the audience is a folklorist.
Yeah.
But that at the same time are uniquely like curated for that individual to answer. So like it is relevant to specifically what they study and what their work is. Maybe give them an opportunity to promo something that's really cool that they've done, and that is kind of a layup for them. It's not like you know, we're not trying to do like a dissertation defense on the show. Like we want people to be seen. I guess maybe it's like make the questions accessible, make the guest feel seen in the questions that we ask, like we actually did research. We're not asking every guest like what is folklore, you know, because that's just not what the show is. And then also make, you know, don't ask questions that are so big that they feel like they needed to have reread all their shit to answer, you know. Just make it something that's like really interesting, and then to have fun. I mean, like ask questions that make people like smile and like, how'd you know that? How'd you know that I have blah 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 postcard collection or whatever?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. It's a very safe space, both for the people you know, doing the interview, getting interviewed, but also like you said, for the chat, for the people watching. It's great.
We do our best, and there's always room for improvement.
It shows. No, it shows. It's great.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, really, the biggest limitations at this point are a lot of what Twitch's like the platform's mechanics are. Like that, like there are other things we could be doing or whatever, but it's like that and time. You know, it's
yeah. Are you kidding?
We do this show every single week. We have an episode. There are very few weeks we've not had an episode. We don't have a guest every single episode, but we do stream just about every single week. And most of the time we have a guest, so it's pretty wild.
Superheroes, I swear, Daisy. I don't know how y'all do it, but
well, it was a lot. I'll say it was a lot easier when Dom Tartaglia, who's now the state folklorist of Florida, when he was captain and employed, and I'm already absolute workaholic freak. So the two of us together during the pandemic, we were at home, really made a lot of legwork happen for it. But
so smart, so brilliant. Oh, I love you both. It's such a good show, and if anybody, please go watch. It's so lovely. You will learn something new every episode.
Follow us on social media and just see if the guest, you know, that you connect with their research or whatever in the promo schedule, and hop in if you can. But they go on, the interviews all go on YouTube, so hopefully you know, someday they'll be turned into a collection of sorts of just a moment in time of, you know, the folklore's history or something. But yeah, for now you can watch them all on YouTube, and
great.
There's just a lot of content there, but it's
and
fun.
It's great. And no, it's very lovely. It's very lovely.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it seems, right, that there has been such a love and such like a deep passion for this world, Daisy, coming from you. And you've learned a lot of things about community, you've learned a lot of things about people, you know. But I'm interested now. How did you kind of find the world of the spooky?
The spooky. So during my master's degree program, I honestly don't remember like what led me to choose this. I've always been interested in weird stuff. Okay, my first job ever was at an antique store. In high school, I worked at an antique store, and I was like really big into like oddities collecting and like weird like bones, relics of, you know, culture past, commercialized merchandise, whatever. I was like into like weird kind of like how did the world come to create this object, whatever it was. I was into that kind of stuff. So I think that I've already had like kind of an edgy streak about me.
Yes.
And so I think you know, middle like in my master's degree program at Utah State University, which is it's a folklore program, but it's like an American Studies, English, folklore, creative writing. Like you're all in the same cohort under the sort of English department umbrella. So I was with a lot of different people who are studying all kinds of different things, and a couple of the advisors who are there are really interested in legends. And so I was also interested in legends. Like, why are people telling these stories about weird stuff, supernatural stuff? stuff that like probably will never happen, but people believe. Like, why are people believing these? Like, you know, it's one thing to say I don't believe in ghosts. It's another to say you don't believe in vaccines or something. You know, like those are interesting to me. Those are like interesting questions about the world. So, I was thinking like, well, and then I had to write a master's thesis. So I was like, what am I going to write about? Like, what is this thing I'm going to write about? And I've always been really interested also in, as like a side project, paleontology. Like when I was a little kid, that was like my dream job. Like I wanted to be a dinosaur person. Yeah, which I love. I love.
Same.
So yes. I know. I have a cool. Did I show you my cool tattoo? By the way,
Daisy.
it's the Animal Crossing fossil, but like a real fossil. Anyway.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I love it. Anyway, I'm really proud of it. I was like thinking of fossils, like also check this out. But
do you have a favorite dinosaur? Now I really want to know.
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard question.
Is that hard? Yeah, I
don't know. Okay, my favorite, like I don't know. Maybe this is gonna be like maybe cliche for dinosaur people.
Who cares?
But I really like Tiktaalik, which is not a dinosaur. He's like Tiktaalik is considered one of the like first amphibians or like first documented species of animals that went from water to land. So there was like you know most creatures on Earth were in the water for a long time, in the ocean, and then he's like Tiktaalik is like one of the creatures that came to land. So they sort of lived like betwixt worlds, and I always think that's kind of cool. They're like the
first overachiever.
Yeah, they're like emblematic of a change of era, maybe is a way to think about it too. They're like, and again, that is through like that is only what we have found available to us in science. There's lots of other species too, but there's an interesting sort of like culture around Tiktaalik specifically as being like a symbol of this kind of transition from water to land. So cool. I think that's kind of cool. So anyway, I was an animal kid. I'm already thinking about animals. I'm already thinking about people. I'm thinking about legends and supernatural stuff. So, when I would say maybe the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine, this will circle back, is an animal that I've always found as like I've always considered it to be at least one of my favorites, if not my favorite animal, probably since I was like maybe 10 or something, like I was a little kid. It's not been like that present in my mind until much later in my, my life and my studies. But I was interested in the thylacine, which is an animal that is native to Australia and Tasmania. And it looks kind of like a wolf or a canine, but it is taxonomically like distinct because it's a marsupial, so it's actually closer related to kangaroos, but it's sort of like a quadruped dog-like animal, and it has some stripes on its back. And it's interesting to my study into the world, I think, because it is an animal that we know to have been alive during the recent centuries, like the 20th century, that then went extinct, but people still believe it exists today. So the last known documented thylacine in captivity was in 1936 at the Boomara Zoo in Hobart, Tasmania, which is sort of like the southernmost island off the coast of Australia. So it's like the southern island in Australia. And so it died in captivity there, and then so we have like actual photographic evidence of the existence of these animals. There's like real verifiable physical evidence that these animals existed alongside humans, and they existed on mainland Australia until about 2,000 years ago too. So at that time they had a relationship with Aboriginal Australians too, as well as they do today. That continues, but they would sort of like last bastion of the thylacine, also known as Tasmanian tiger. I'm kind of using them interchangeably, but
that's fine.
They the last bastion of their existence was in Tasmania. So they went extinct, but they weren't officially declared by like I would say Western or dominant science, institutional science, until the 1980s. And because extinction is like kind of a muddy category, people don't believe that they've fully gone extinct, right? They experience them, they see them. People report even up to today seeing Tasmanian tigers in the wilds. They see thylacines on their hikes, they see them around, and people go so far as to make organizations that are talking about the sightings of thylacines and how the scientific community is disavowing the actual very real evidence of this experiential knowledge of people interacting with thylacines in the wild today. So I was like, what the heck? So you can see how this combines supernatural, prehistoric animal, and folklore and all of the same sort of things. So I was like, well, you know what? Why don't I just pursue this subject? So I guess in terms of your question about the spooky, what helped me lead into it was thinking about extinction and memorialization and legends and belief, I guess. So that was really what got me into thinking about it. But I'm doing it in a very specific way that is sort of unique to other people who might be interested in legends or that kind of scholarship, because usually they're thinking about entities that are there's no physical evidence for, whether that be, you know, a Slender Man who is made, you know, online, and there's, you know, that has led to influencing others, or it's Bigfoot who has had physical evidence documented, but it is disavowed by the larger scientific community and sort of social cultural community about whether or not it exists. But the thylacine is different because it definitely was extant and then was declared extinct, and then there's a whole movement in conversation around that I think relates to colonization and you know, settler imaginary and their influence on you know, the ability to literally decimate huge populations of people, and how do we deal with that, and what are the real life tangible effects of, you know, the climate crisis on the way that people interact with the world, you know, whatever their relationship to settler colonialism is, like all. So it got me thinking about all these other questions of like, why are we like, what I am less interested in whether or not the thylacine is actually extant or is present alive today than I am that people keep talking about that question over and over and over again for the last approaching 100 years. So I think that's really interesting. So that's what led me into this, like, why are we talking about it if people, you know, who is, what narratives get priority over the other, where's power in the ability to tell the legend, the ability to interact, like what does usurps institutional knowledge? Does experiential knowledge of like you actually confronting a thylacine with your dogs on a hike, does that usurp the knowledge of the larger like dominant scientific community in Tasmania? I don't know. So all of these questions made me write my master's thesis about that thing. So I'm still interested in like spooky stuff and legends and the supernatural, but mostly as it relates to extinction, memorialization, and threatened and endangered species as we sort of experience collectively a significant climate collapse and species loss. So that's what I'm into.
Brilliant. And I love this idea. I first of all love that was your gateway, right, into this world. Not just spooky, right? But
it's
everything.
like, I mean, it's spooky, but it's like spooky's real life. Your real life is scary. You know,
and that's like, what I love about what you said, because I had never really, just like you, I was also a dinosaur kid, and I had never really thought about this concept of haunting, but through paleontology, through dinosaurs, this idea of not really there, but was it really there?
But was it there?
Air, you know, and the stories, like you said, associated with it, this idea of belief, things getting disproved, right, just based on opinion or scientific fact. Like, I mean, so such a cool idea.
Like, are dinosaurs monsters? Maybe. I guess it depends. They used to certainly be conceived of as monsters. They were early on in paleontological, you know, study. They were definitely seen as like former monsters or relics of you know, God. Fossils used to be interpreted as like jokes that God would play for the humans to find, you know, which is a very exceptionalist way to understand fossils' existence, but it's also a way to interpret that through belief. It's a human-centric way to think about it too. And I don't know, it just makes you ask a lot of different questions. Like none of those are the one answer, because there's not one answer. It's a lot of different answers at the same time. And I think that the early conceptions of, you know, dinosaurs as monsters was reignited in the 90s with Jurassic Park, right? Like, you know, it's horrifying, but it's more horrifying in the fact that they really were real and really did actually exist. I mean, maybe they didn't share time with humans, but other animals have that are very monstrous. Like I'm thinking giant sloths, for example, or like other kinds of giant animals like did inhabit life with humans at the same time. And so I think that there's something, I don't know, something happening about the supernatural in our psyche that is about the death of these things, and then our ability, or the disavowal of that ability to actually create extinction, because that wasn't really an idea that wasn't connected to human influence until like the late 1800s, when really people started to go like, oh, maybe we shouldn't just like mass capture, mass occur buffalo or something, right? Like, because there were really a lot of species around that time, the late 1800s to the like early 1900s, that went extinct specifically because of humans, in the North America as well as Australia. There's a very similar relationship between the, I would say, colonization of land in Australia and the United States, partially because of how big both of those areas are, the continents, there's so much space, so there's a very similar approach to like being within the land, for colonizers or for settler descendants, I should say. But anyway,
brilliant,
scary stuff, and a lot stuff. What else is scary is a lot of white people don't want to realize their role in the settler colonial like destruction of the land, either actively today or historically. So I think what I was
terrifying.
So whenever I'm talking about the Thylacine and people's the sort of broad interpretation of it, I'm either talking about like Australian or Tasmanian kind of nationalism or national identity or nationhood, or I'm talking about the like lived experiences of settler descendants. There's a whole different sort of cosmology and relationship with the land that Aboriginal Australians and Tasmanians have, that includes the Thylacines' extantness today, but that's not usually what I am talking about, because the relationships are fundamentally and of cosmologically, ontologically different. So
absolutely.
But thinking about fear, there's a lot to say about the way that settler colonialism shapes the land, and the way that we talk about that shaping through animal bodies instead of human bodies, and like what makes it easier to talk about. So anyway, those are all the questions that I got led down, where I was like, damn, legend, Thylacine, and then it's like, oh, like, damn, we're talking about some real shit now. So I definitely have gone down a lot of rabbit holes thinking about this kind of idea. But now in my research with like about community and about I guess you could say the monstrous, or rather the non-human, maybe, I don't know, that would be an interesting thing to talk about being monsters with, but the beyond human, I think a lot about not just like specific species, but the sort of frameworks with which we understand multiple species. So my master's thesis was really just like on the Thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger. And now when I'm thinking about community, I'm thinking about all of us in conversation all the time, sometimes with individual species, sometimes with lots of different species. But I'm asking similar questions about like extinction and what is our responsibility or not, or no responsibility, or what, how do we create in the face of destruction at our own hands, those kinds of things. So, so they do connect. They just maybe didn't sound like that on the first. Thinking a lot about extinction as like a sort of a trope or a concept in the field of folklore, more than just an individual like legend with an individual species, because it's never that. It's always connected to these like larger things, and in a dissertation you get a lot more space to talk about the like bigger concepts, rather than just like the one essay that you write or whatever for your master's thesis. There's just always so much more to say. There's so much more to say, and I guess that's why I kept doing higher ed. I had more to say. So
and and you should, I hope you always do, because people need to listen to that stuff,
I hope so. I find it very cool.
It's so cool. It's so brilliant. And you kept throwing around this word, and I'm very curious, especially because you mentioned fear. But what do you think is a monster, Daisy?
I've been thinking about this. I don't know.
I hope, and you just end it there.
Damn.
I don't know.
I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about this. Okay, so I also I feel like a monster has to be the manifestation of a threat to humans. Or human ways of being first before it is anything else. So it's like I say physical manifestation, I mean like loosely, maybe like a metonymic is maybe better, or like the word stands in, or the Sasquatch stands in for climate anxiety, whatever. But some kind of like, I think it must be some sort of physical or symbolic, image, symbol representation of a threat, to a perceived threat to humans or humans' ways of life. I don't always think the threat is legitimate because I think that there's like, plenty of humans who have been monstricized for various reasons, but there is, I think that's all I got right now. So there's some kind of like manifestation of a threat. So I don't know. There could be more that I'm not thinking about that deeply, but to me, that's when somebody says that's a monster, this is monstrous, there's a threat behind that claim.
And there is fear, I think, in a lot of what you don't understand, right? Like that is a lot of the times where fear is born for people.
Totally.
And I love that you included this concept of that, of just specifically feeling fear in a human sense. That's what deems things monstrous.
Or makes you interpret something as a threat. It might not actually be a threat, but your fear is what is contributing to the threat or whatever. But there might be more qualifications to monster.
I think it's a great answer.
That's what it makes me think about.
Yeah, and I'm excited to pick your brain about it more.
Let's do it.
Okay, so obviously, surprise, right? The thylacine is what we're talking about. And I think you explained it very lovely in the way what it is, kind of how you found it, how it found you, how it's blossomed so many other parts of your research. And I'm curious. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just like looking. I'm like, do I have some thylacines next to me? I think they're mostly, I have like a little collection in my bedroom. In my bedroom, I have a collection of thylacine stuff. I have like my ears. I have like ears. I have some pictures, but they're like not that, I can't like grab it off the wall. I could bring you one.
Please, and feel free at any point, because that's cool. Adorable. And I love that, and I love how passionate you are about thylacine. And I'm curious, you mentioned, of course, this is what makes a legend, right? Is this idea of believability and this idea of, does it still exist? And so I'm curious, what are some legends, whether that's like an origin story or like legends that continue to this day that you've heard around the thylacine?
There's some really interesting specific ones. So there are a number of places that are just actively collecting sightings of thylacines. Okay. So there's the National Park Service actually in Tasmania collects thylacine sightings of creatures in the wild, because it is scientific data to say like, I'm seeing all of these things. Like the park rangers want to know that information, how frequently it is and where that is, where they take place in the park. And so there are some places like that. There's another organization called the Thylacine Awareness Group of Australia. And there's an off branch in Tasmania too, but they take every sighting of every thylacine at face value as truth. They believe you, which is great. It's a very folkloric approach to that. At the same time, there is actually a scale that was developed by a park ranger in Tasmania, like in the 70s, to sort of like put on a gradient, like the accuracy or likelihood or usefulness of a particular sighting. So like it grades things like, what time of day was it? Like if you saw them at 2 a.m., it's dark, versus, middle of the day, different. Whether or not the person is from that area makes a big difference. If you're a tourist, it's actually more likely you saw a thylacine than not, because you're not primed necessarily with that knowledge to see it. So kind of out of place describing the same thing might actually be more evidential. There's other things like whether or not you were drunk, whether or not you had lights, whether or not somebody was with you, if the other person also saw it, that kind of thing. So anyway, so there's like ways that people collect sightings, but most of the time people report seeing it, coming across it, sometimes in neighborhoods, sometimes in wilderness areas like national parks and things like that. The state of Tasmania is actually, I believe it is still correct that it is 33% protected wildlands. So there's like 33% of it is tied to some kind of park service or some kind of management service that makes it like less touched by people. Maybe that's the really wrong, maybe the better way to say that is people do not inhabit it 24 hours a day. Part of it is managed away from urban environments, basically. So it's like possible that thylacines could be there. Anyway, it kind of adds to the possibility of them. But some other like funny stories about, or like some interesting or notable ones. So there's a town in like southwest Australia called Nannup. And there, Nannup. There's like a ton of, I'm actually going to double check that just because I want to make sure that I don't like.
Check it.
I don't want you to have to like cite me.
No, you're fine. Do not worry.
I'm trying to remember. Nannup. So I'm just looking at really fun stuff. Okay, so there's a town in southwest Australia called Nannup, and in Nannup there's like basically a kind of, I don't know, town like support and identity with the thylacine. So it's like image is everywhere in the town. Like there's like sculptures of it, and there's like murals of it. You buy it at gift shops, things like that. There's also like a there's also like a hotel that you can stay at there that's like a thylacine themed kind of.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of cool. And then there's also another a more notable example of like a legend told, like a very like hyper local legend about thylacines, is the Tantanoola tiger.
Ooh, okay.
And the Tantanoola tiger, I want to like show you a picture of it.
Please do,
because it's pretty interesting.
I would love to see it.
Okay, so this guy, is there like if I put this in the chat here, will you see it?
Yeah, put it in the chat. Are you kidding?
See.
Always.
Hold on. Let me see.
Always.
Okay, I swear this will be. Oh, maybe I gotta like. Here's a good. Let's see if we go to this full article. If we'll have it. Oh, come on. Do you have the picture? There's an article about it I have here, but
Great.
I want this picture to show you because it's silly. I don't know. Here's a weird picture. If you're logged into Facebook, you can probably see this. I just want to show you the picture, but
Oh, okay.
So I can tell you a little bit about the legend. So the Tantanoola tiger.
Oh my gosh, yes, I see it. Wow.
So there's that, and then I'll describe this in a second for you. But just for reference, this is what a thylacine looks like.
Yep.
Here's an article.
Thank you.
But so the Tantanoola tiger. So there's other like hyper specific kind of like local legend about the Tantanoola tiger, and the story goes that there's a person who was like out in the wilderness in this area of Australia that interacts with a large, what they think to be a Tasmanian tiger, a large sort of striped quadruped that assaults them, and they freak out and tell the town, and then the town goes out and captures the Tantanoola tiger, the animal, and then puts that animal on display in the hotel in Tantanoola as the Tantanoola tiger caught. So this is sort of like an example of like when people go out and like I caught a Fiji mermaid. It's a little bit like that. Because the animal that they taxidermy is distinctly not a thylacine. It's definitely like maybe a weird dog.
Yeah.
And I know online there are people who tell the story way better with better details. And have way more of a relationship to it. But what always fascinated me is the like memorialization of the thylacine or stories or creatures related to caught up in this narrative, whether or not it was actually the thylacine or something else in the neighborhood, whatever. But so this guy was on display for a long time at the Tangela hotel, and I just think it's really cool, and it's a good example of like the physical evidence versus not physical evidence kind of cryptid like nature of the thylacine. But but most of the legends that people tell today about the thylacine are just that it still exists, that it has persevered beyond its persecution that led up in part to its extinction. So that in itself is usually what people are talking about. I saw it, my cousin saw it. We have my great great grandpa caught a thylacine, and we had to get rid of the skin because it was a blight to our family, what was once an heirloom, like those sorts of stories about its relationship and presence in the lives of settler descendants in Tasmania and Australia.
Yeah.
So that's usually what they're talking about.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. I love this lore.
There's a couple great like Reddit threads about this guy. Like if anybody's listening or interested in like looking up other stories or other conversations about like what has become sort of canonized as like stories about the thylacine or about specific legendary events and sites. I was just actually writing rewriting sort of an old section of my master's thesis about the institutional commodification of the thylacine, and there's a lot of like and mostly it relates to tourism. So there's some great articles already written about tourism and Tasmanian tiger specifically. But I was thinking about, my folklore brain is like, okay, well, there's people on the ground that like aren't a hotel who have a relationship with tourism and the thylacine. So like there's some independently owned like homes or Airbnb type places that you can rent, specifically marketed as being around or near like common sightings of thylacines. So like you could actually go rent at the Mole Creek Hotel is one of them, or Mole Creek actually it's not Tassie Tiger Lodge, that's what I'm thinking of. The Tassie Tiger Lodge, for example, you could go to, and part of the idea is that if you're there long enough, maybe you'll see the trail cam, or maybe you'll see the thylacine. But otherwise, you'll see some great, Tasmanian wildlife, including wombats and wallabies. Like you might see some other cute guys, but
other marsupials.
Yeah, other marsupial guys. But there's definitely like a part of the marketing of it is that it's near sightings of thylacines, and that data is collected from organizations like the Thylacine Awareness Group of Australia or these other organizations that are working towards proving the thylacine's present existence today in Tasmania, which I think is fascinating. So it's like there's all these like little vernacular everyday ways that people are engaging with this question about its existence or not today in Tasmania. And there's no denying that its presence is fully there. Like there is a very strong presence, but is it physical today? That's really the subject of that's really the question. Like the symbol is everywhere. It has become a metonym for Australia in some ways, as in like if you see a thylacine, you think Australia or you think Tasmania
immediately. That's
what a metonym does. So yeah, I think there's a kind of national reclamation, national pride. There's all these other ways that it seeps into people's lives that are tied to its present existence, the sort of perseverance beyond persecution, because
I love that you said.
It is in part, the thylacine's extinction was in part motivated by humans, but there's a bunch of things that made it really vulnerable. So for one, there's a lot of, after the introduction of colonization sets in, they bring with them animals that occupy similar niches, including dingoes and cats and other kind of animals that occupy a similar sort of scavenging or carnivorous type niche in the ecosystem. There's people just like cutting down trees. Logging is a huge problem. Loss of ecosystem. it's a bottleneck population in that they were only extant in, or the last sort of vestige of their populace was extant on an island. So it's not like they could spread out or like move. There's not a lot there.
Right.
And then they were also persecuted for agricultural related actually, let me back up. That bottleneck population, and then they also, because of that bottleneck population, there is a vulnerability to disease. So there are some scholars, some archivists, as well as like thylacine researchers, like scientific researchers, who've gone back and looked at like skeletal structures and diagrams and blah blah blah. That suggests that in part of that they were maybe subjected to a disease because there's so few of them and they're sort of a population bottleneck, like in a similar way that the Tasmanian devil today, which is another Australian marsupial, the Tasmanian devil has a genetic predisposition to a particular kind of facial cancer that creates like huge wounds on their face and eventually kills them. Yes. And so there's an interesting relationship between these two animals, not because mostly due to their place, their region, relevance and their sort of taxonomic history. Like they're both in Tasmania marsupials that are carnivores, but the Tasmanian devil, the only way that they still exist like today in our lives is due to the conservation and rewilding as well as controlled breeding like missions of scientists and zoologists in the area, because their population is so predisposed to genetic like cancer basically that they need to do a captive breeding program to make sure that the DNA is like far enough away that they're not just like constantly interbreeding and continuing the cycle. So there is a suggestion that something similar could have happened to a thylacine, maybe not like a facial cancer, but some other kind of genetic predisposition to a disease that made them vulnerable to a lot of these factors that were going on at the same time related to colonization and environmental loss. And the story that people like to tell the most about the death of the thylacine is that they were persecuted by farmers basically for their detrimental livestock issues. Maybe the way to say that would be the thylacine was persecuted for just destroying sheep from farmers who were settlers in Tasmania, and there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that it was a big enough problem to justify a bounty, but it was sort of like that threat to livestock, threat to my farm is an external problem that, combined with the thylacine like looking really cool, like has this great stripes on it, sort of led to the justification of the bounty that was placed on them by both public and private institutions. So it was like people were getting money for killing thylacines, and they'd get money for killing female thylacines and for killing babies because it was reducing the population. And that tends to happen with a lot of population control type type bounties where there's like there's a gender distinction, there's a sort of scale of price, like it's more expensive if you kill a female because she's breeding, whatever. That kind of thing is really interesting. So anyway, so all of those kind of like led to a perfect storm of thylacine loss. But the story that people tell the most is that they were hunted to extinction, which I also think is very fascinating, because it misunderstands a little bit of the science, but it also shows what people really have latched onto, which is their even metaphorical involvement or their symbolic involvement in the death of this animal. Or their disavowal of that idea and say like it's a scientific cover-up, they actually are still out there today, is another really interesting way to to relate to what essentially the colonization has done to Tasmania, which is decimate entire populations, including human populations. And it's much easier, unfortunately, for settler descendants to talk about the decimation of animal species than it is to talk about humans.
Of course.
And so I think that that's really fascinating too. So there's some of that I get into briefly in my thesis, but I've thought a lot more about now, and that makes a larger play in this sort of dissertation I'm currently writing, or at least not the conversation about thylacines, but this conversation about like ecological harm and colonization and how we interpret our environment and what folklorists can do on the everyday kind of ground level to work alongside those relationships and to and anyway.
Yeah, that perseverance that you said.
Yeah. Right, the perseverance past persecution. Like I really think that is a good way of thinking about the death of the thylacine today, whether you think the thylacine is extant today or went extinct and people are crazy, whatever you want to say about it. Like, there's something about the story of the thylacine, the legend of its potential existence today, as a way of sort of either absolving one's lineage of guilt by either saying, wow, you know, like, it's a government cover-up, it still exists today, the harm we did to the environment really wasn't that bad. I don't know if it's always that conscious. I am putting that out there as one interpretation, but then another interpretation could be, look at how amazing it is. People are still talking about it. People are still honoring it. People are still imagining that it's out there. It could be out there. Whether or not you 100% agree, it still has a sort of symbolic effect of, you know, being alive past actively being hunted, which a lot of people feel and are actively being hunted in our life. You know, hunting is maybe one way you could call it. Genocide's another way you could call it, right? Like, there are a lot of people who I think relate to the idea that the thylacine is a sort of symbolic example of how you can persevere despite what everybody else is telling you. Everybody's saying they're gone. Institutions are saying it doesn't matter. Institutions are saying the thylacine isn't here. But in fact, it is still out there in the wild, and that gives me hope. So I think that there's something very powerful about that metaphor too, for lots of different kinds of people. Australians, Tasmanians, among others, among queer people, among resistors, among environmental activists, among me, you know, like, that gives me hope. If the thylacine's still out there despite all of this sort of, like, you know, trauma it's endured, that's a very hopeful idea. Whether or not it's true, I do think, is an interesting question, but what's more interesting is that people keep talking about it like it's true. Especially people online, and especially artists or people who are creating a lot are, like, very much taken by this symbol. So that was another element of my master's thesis too, like the artistic interpretation beyond, like, outside of Australia, because I live in the United States. It's a little different, but
sure.
Anyway, I think it's important.
No, go ahead.
I don't know. I think the part of the thylacine story, that active persecution, is different than a lot of other cryptids also. Like, at least the dominant story. Like, when we talk about wendigos, people talk about being pursued by the wendigo. More than they talk about pursuing the wendigo, you know, to sort of hunt it down. It's sort of an all natural, it's sort of a being that is ever present, right? Sasquatch is similar, other kinds of animals. And these, again, I think, I don't know, maybe you can help me walk through this, because I have an inclination that a concept of a cryptid is a very Western or sort of settler concept, because it's about trying to understand stuff you don't know. And that I want to make room for, you know, indigenous interpretations of these beings with contested existences is very different than the popular or the commodified or the Western or whatever. And that there's an anxiety about, like, not knowing stuff, but also the discovery of stuff, which the idea of discovery is a very you know, Western kind of sense of I don't know, ownership, exceptionalism, something where you can say, like, I discovered this thing, even though people had known about it before. It's just that the white people didn't know about it yet, or whatever it is. But there's something about the cryptid that's part of that relationship too, like that unknowing or the contested existence. Like, the Thylacine's existence for Aboriginal Tasmanians, from what I understand, is not contested. It is extant because it is part of a different cosmological understanding, ontology of the world. It's part of a different way of understanding the world. And the scientific community's ability to say this is or is not alive is interesting for the subject of folklore. How do you determine what is or isn't alive? And then part of the reason extinction is so fascinating too is that, like, how do you quantify? Are you sure you counted every single thylacine body and you know every single one is dead? Like, there's a lot of ambiguity around that subject too. And I think most biologists would say that extinction is actually means like the animal no longer serves an active role in the niche or in within the ecosystem. So like, okay, maybe 10 rhinos exist, right? Or what, 10 white rhinos are left, or whatever it is, but they are not like occupying the role that they once did within the ecosystem's balance. So they're functionally extinct is what that community says. But anyway, that's different than like, I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I'm thinking about all these different threads where I'm like, this like idea of them perseverance past persecution is, I think, really important for the interpretation of the thylacine, but also for cryptids in general. But the thylacine really specifically, like the Sasquatch is not pursued in the same way. It was not persecuted. I mean, it is sort of a marginal being in the world, and yes, people go out and to hunt or to find Bigfoot, but there wasn't like a mandated bounty that says you get money. In fact, you actually, if you find Bigfoot and you kill Bigfoot, there are several states with ordinances that said that you have actually killed an endangered species and will be prosecuted, which I think is fascinating. It's a problem that you did that because it's an endangered species. So that's really fascinating too. But the thylacine was actively persecuted by a lot of different communities, namely, settler colonial and then the kind of institutional repercussions, or the institutions that maintain that kind of I don't know, overview, interpretation, power over the land, whatever. Unlike some other cryptids. So I think that's really fascinating, and that's the piece that gives a lot of hope for people. I also think other cryptids give ecological hope for people, like, of course, like Bigfoot. If Bigfoot's out there, maybe we didn't ruin the planet. Like maybe we didn't all terrible. And then there's a lot of people who say like it is it's sort of persevering in the face of, I don't know, ecological crisis, which is a different interpretation than past persecution. But there's something about the persecution of the thylacine that I think people really connect to, and maybe it's this. Maybe it's a similar experience of feeling persecuted by the world. Maybe it's a victimization of your state in the world, but it's also not, because you're not a victim. You've evaded. There's hope in the perseverance, right? You've evaded the capture that the world is trying to put you under. So I don't know. There's lots of ideas there. Anyway.
Great ideas. Great ideas. And
I don't know how you're going to edit this.
Great. Great ideas. And you mentioned one that I'd like to ask you about more is this idea of perseverance and things, this idea of extinction, this idea of believability. And when we were talking back and forth before this interview specifically, you had mentioned something fascinating to me about this idea of the queer-coded nature of maybe the thylacine, cryptids in general. And I would love for you to like elaborate more on that.
Oh yeah. There's actually a great article I'll send you.
I love this. I love how many articles you have in your brain already.
I got a lot. It's called An Unknowable Wildness. Okay. I give it as like bonus reading for my students if they want it.
That's so sweet.
They don't always want it. Yeah, it's called, I'll put it in the chat. It's for 2018. It's called An Unknowable Wildness, an analysis of cryptids as queer cultural iconography by Levi Horde. I have the article. I can send it to you if you want, but
that would be great. I got you though.
Great. Yeah. Okay. It's a great article. So all I'm doing, needless to say, other people have had this idea too. It's not like unique unto me, but we were obviously thinking about this at the same time because my master's thesis was printed in 2019. So, and this was from 2018. So we were thinking about it at the same time. But on the internet, maybe because of these sort of, maybe the detachment from land, maybe there's an element there too. Like detachment from place maybe makes this easier for Americans or avid internet users. Australians do this too, but to use the symbol of the thylacine in ways that are less tied to the land-based history and more tied to the symbolic nature of the persecution of the legend, or rather the legend itself of persecution. But that seems to be, again, it seems to be the really strong thing people hold on to if they're telling stories about the Thylacine is usually about how it was hunted to extinction, which is true and untrue. Right? It's factual. I'm using true kind of flippantly, but it is, there's fact to say that is a component of it, but there's more evidence that was leading to the sort of cataclysmic mess of the death of the Thylacine than just the persecution because of a bounty. But people connect very strongly to the humans' role in creating the bounty for Thylacines, but then also being the hunters of Thylacines, and people are very disturbed by this. In one way or another, whether they are like, it was a different time and it was sad, or if they denounce it outright, whatever. The Thylacine wasn't the only animal to have bounties on it. Koalas also had bounties too, and they almost completely went extinct. The koalas are not particularly defensive creatures. They kind of have no real predators. They just hang out in trees and get drunk on eucalyptus all the time. But they really do. They're very easy, and they're very soft. I don't know if you've ever pet a koala.
So I've wanted to, Daisy, so bad. I never have.
They're so soft. Well, it's easy to see why they were persecuted. Anyway, so I don't know. People sort of latch on this idea about the Thylacine being hunted, and then the idea of it still existing, or like somehow evading capture, evading death, as a very compelling way to think about your own life as a queer person who is experiencing active law, like judicial governance based persecution. You know, it's not just what people say anymore. It's literally in the law that you cannot access certain rights or whatever. You know, you don't have a right to this, you don't have a right to this, which continues to harm, you know, queer people across, particularly trans people, but across identities. Access to, you know, life-saving healthcare, for example, or just access to feeling safe in public spaces is much more contentious than it was, you know, maybe 10 years ago, but also kind of never. It's never been safe to be a trans person in the United States, because of some of these laws. So there's like a relationship that you can see between queerness in general and the persecution of the Thylacine and the persecution of queer people. And then the Thylacine's ability to exist beyond it is hopeful. So that's already sort of established here. But some other things that are interesting too about the Thylacine, and that I like to think about, it's not just the narrative, it's also the specific animals. So the Thylacine itself, I like to say that cryptids, or it's not just, I mean, it's a specific animal, but it's a specific framework of cryptozoology, like what makes something a cryptid. So part of what I say makes something a cryptid, in addition to it having a sort of contested existence, which is already a kind of queer coded thing, like contested existence. Are you sure you're bisexual? Like, okay, whatever it is, you know, like there's contestation of your identity already, and then so like that's a relationship between, or a similarity between cryptids and queer people, and the queer experience, I should say. There's also the body. So I think that for something to be a cryptid, or to become a cryptid, which I think you can become, it can be a process. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking about with extinction. But for something to become a cryptid, I think they need to have a non-normative body, or something about the body that is exploitable. So a Thylacine has all these stripes. Looks like a wolf, but it's definitely not. It's got these stripes. It also has a jaw that can open over 90 degrees, which is kind of rare for a carnivore. Most of them, it's about 80 degrees or less, something like that. But a Thylacine can like open its mouth really big.
Really wide,
Yeah. And then, so that's kind of unique. So there's something about it that like makes it unique unto the animal kingdom. But another example, like Bigfoot, we keep returning to, like a huge, covered in hair. Okay, like that's kind of unique unto the, you know, it has a big foot, distinctly like 2 or 3 times as large as the average adult human foot, right? Like it is huge.
Very big.
So there's something like exploitable or non-normative about that body too. I also think that there needs to be a threat to humans or human ways of life. So for something to be a cryptid, it needs to present a threat either to physically the harm to humans, so like Bigfoot could kick your ass probably. Like he's huge.
Yeah.
He's huge, right?
100%.
Right, or like you know, Wendigo you can starve to death because of the winter, whatever. You know, there's lots of ways you could do it. So that's like a threat to human life, but ways of life also, like if they're a threat to agriculture, like the Thylacine, or like chupacabra for also is a threat to agriculture, right? Like so you're making it difficult for me to have sustaining, you know, life sustaining practices for humans, something like that. And then what's my last thing? Oh, my last thing is so like queer folks, there's a threat to human ways of life, that way of life being, you know, heteronormative or whatever, you know, hegemonic culture that says, you know, homosexuality is not normal, something like that, or that trans bodies are not normal, even though that's not true, but that's part of it's a threat to the paradigm of how people exist in the world. And then the last thing is that cryptids live in not typically occupied by human spaces. So they might live in the woods, or a hill, or a cave, or they live
in a tunnel
or in a sewer, right? Like a human could be there, but they're usually not living there. So there's an interesting, I think, mapping where, especially for rural queer experience, where they're like, oh, queer people only live in New York and LA. or San Francisco. That's it, right? But there's a huge and so therefore there's no queer people who could exist out here. They live somewhere else, right? Like I think that idea, like that idea that they, or even, you know, even in any city, they say that they live somewhere else, they don't live here, or that queer people can't possibly exist in the rural parts of the South or whatever. It's like, yeah, they do. They exist everywhere.
100 billion%.
But like pushing that to the side, or the idea that they're only in certain spaces, adds to the kind of contestability of their existence. Like, well, they're not with the people who decide what is and isn't real, so therefore they're not real, or whatever. Like, so I think all of those things, any cryptid, I mean, I think particularly the Thylacine, because it has this like narrative of hope attached to it, but I suppose you could attach that, or study another cryptid and say the same thing or something similar about it. I just haven't spent that time, but it's something I want to do, to talk more about how these things are all connected to queer identity. So that's sort of my relationship to it. This article about cryptids and queer culture, they don't define cryptids as much, but they do talk about some similarities between like queerness and cryptids as a whole, and particularly as they're represented like on the internet compared to real life. Like most of the time when people talk about the Thylacines, they're not talking about them being gay. On the internet, they're kind of talking about them being gay.
The internet's a lovely place.
Yes. There's a really cute, really cute little Thylacine plush that there's an artist who has created this like plush called the Lacine, and the stripes on it are like rainbow stripes. It's really cute. Anyway,
that's
so
beautiful.
Queerness and cryptids is very much tied into the artwork, into symbolism of queer people on the internet. So whether it's like, you know, gay Babadook or
Daddy Mothman.
Yeah, or Daddy Mothman or whatever. Like, they're all kind of like, there's a queering that's happening, I think, because of cryptids' marginalized experience in the world.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah, there's a ton there.
It is so lovely. It is my favorite thing. I think it is so
I think it's so cute.
Cool.
I think it's so cute. Yeah.
And you get cute plushes out of it. So
exactly. Yeah, totally.
And speaking of like that idea, right, of queering the Thylacine, or cryptids in general, and like all of these cute plushies and things. Are there any other pop culture references where you've heard the Thylacine explored before?
Like as a queer icon, or just in general?
Or just in general, just in general.
So there's a couple ways that people hear about the Thylacine, and like most of it today is through the Thylacine cloning project and any kind of like Scientific American article about de-extinction, whatever this notion of like that it's similar. It's sort of in the team of candidates of cloning, included that also includes like the dodo and the mammoth, woolly mammoth, and some other less exciting but recently extinct animals. And so it's like, that's usually how people hear about it. There's a multi-million-dollar cloning project in Australia towards developing a completed genome sequence for the thylacine, which could then lead to potential cloning opportunity. There's a lot of complications there. I'm happy to go into that if you want, but it's because kind of interesting. But that's usually where people hear about it if they've heard about it before. There are some other ways that they probably have heard about it, or maybe have heard about it if they're like, I don't know, in pop culture, like 15 years ago or something. Maybe there's like a sort of a moment in the 90s. There's a book that came out, I think, in 1991, which is also when Jurassic Park came out. I'm actually gonna look at it. I'm gonna look at it.
Love it.
Because I'm curious. Off the top of my head. Yeah. Oh, okay. I was wrong. So originally published. This makes sense too, though. It was published in 1999. Okay, so there's a book in like the late 90s, published in 1999 by Julia Lee called The Hunter. And that got adapted into a film. So this is all part of, I think, the like science fiction world of the 90s that was related to de-extinction, but cloning and sort of environmental crises and like the advances of scientific technology and imagining like, what if we brought back things that were dead? And that technology was able to then facilitate some of that because of cloning, et cetera, et cetera. So in 1999, The Hunter comes out. It's a book that got a lot of criticism, actually, by Tasmanians for its depiction, I think, of sort of Tasmanian life in general. But it's about... basically it's about like a solo hunter guy who gets tasked with finding the last thylacine and killing him. Or what do you do in that situation? Anyway, it came out. The reason people might know about this is because it was adapted into a film, and Willem Dafoe is the like main. He's the hunter. And he confronts a CGI thylacine, and it's like very, very sad film. Actually, it's really sad.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's a really sad film, but it's a good film. It's an interesting film, interesting book. Anyway, that's probably been the like largest national influence or international influence on the story of the thylacine. And then there are other like weird little offshoots, like it's been in Monster Quest. It's been on all kinds of, you know, these like sort of Discovery Channel, like Scientific America shows, whatever.
Sure.
That are like, exploring monsters, creatures, ecology, whatever, travel shows, that kind of thing. And then it's I watched this really weird movie one time. I have tried to consume as much thylacine media as possible.
As you should.
And like, as you should. And there was a movie I watched. It's called The Howling 3. It's a horror film in a franchise of werewolf related movies, but it's called The Howling 3, the thylacine or the werelacine or something like that. Basically the idea is what if werewolf but it was Tasmanian tiger. What if werewolf but it was thylacine. And it's really weird. It's not that great of a movie, but it's very much, and there's some less than great representations of indigenous people. Like it's not, it does that thing with the exoticization of indigenous people and like magic and like that. It's kind of yikes, but it does have a very like explicit conversation about the death or the extinction of the thylacine, and then it continuing to live on through human thylacine hybrid, basically through werewolf. So that was interesting because they use like the old footage. There's still footage of the thylacine from like the 20s and the 10s that has that is used in the film, which I think is cool. It's like this archival footage of like actual thylacines in captivity, which is really interesting. But they use some of that in the film, and it's weird. So I don't know, people probably didn't see that unless you're like really deep into like into either horror, like B-list horror movies or thylacines. But that's probably the most pop culture-y it's been. And then it comes up in cycles with this conversation around de-extinction and science. So I think that's when most people come across it. But it is in fictionalized representation too. I wrote a chapter on video games and thylacines also, which is really fun. Cool. There's some video game representation. Mostly it's like... You'll
definitely have to send me that too.
Yeah, it's actually, it's pretty short, actually. It's just like a short little like essay chapter about it. But as far as I know, I'm the only person who've written about that. But there's not that many sort of like 3 different categories of thylacine in video games. There's like, well, there's sort of 2 categories and then one very notable exception. So the 2 categories are like, is the thylacine built into the structure of the game? Is it a DLC or is it a mod? And to me, the difference between downloadable content, the DLC, and a mod is that either the company or the organization has created it for you to purchase and then download because they think that that will make them more money and be successful, or it's a mod in which a team of regular people who are just into the thylacine or whatever actually program something that you can modify your game with, which to me is the really fun folklore part. But and then of course the like one notable exception is the Tasmanian Tiger video game series, which is like a platformer from the early 2000s. It's basically like Australia Mario.
Love it.
Yeah, there's like, it's in terms of like gameplay style, it's pretty much that. But the Tasmanian Tiger, I've been wanting to play that actually. I need to get like something to mod it. I own a copy of it for like PlayStation 2 because I think it came out on PlayStation 2, but maybe it came out PlayStation 1, I don't remember. But anyway, that's another area where like people who are into the thylacine, some of them were introduced to it through the Tasmanian Tiger. And then that's also part of, the digital culture that I think has taken up the thylacine as sort of an honorary part of, I don't know, millennial internet culture or something like that. But anyway, still very niche. But yeah, there's some games where you can get thylacines in them and some ones that you can't, and I just always wish more. Oh, there is also there's an indie game called Petra and the Thylacine that like is sort of a point and click walkthrough game.
Very cool.
And that's kind of cool, but it's cool because it's also sort of like it's sort of like a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. Also, which is kind of fun. So sort of like multiple layers of folklore there, and monstrous. Thinking about. I mean, the thylacine and the wolf is a good thread of inquiry for monsters. And for thinking about these same questions about colonization and the environment and like what is the threat in the woods, that kind of thing. But anyway, that's a good one too. So there's fun. I'll send you that too if you want.
Please do.
Yeah, there's like a Roblox thylacine. I've seen like people make low poly thylacine drawings and stuff that's super cute. So I'm always I'm gonna put it in the game. You can get skin packs to like modify stuff in Minecraft or whatever to be thylacines, or in there's some other games too. But it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, and in case this interview isn't proof enough that Daisy loves,
I love thylacines,
right? If you can explain it, why have you been drawn to them so much for so long, Daisy? Why are they so important to you?
I don't know. I mean, maybe some of it you can, psychoanalyze through my answers to some of these questions. But I mean, I think the one thing I didn't mention earlier was that part of the reason thylacines have been one of my favorite animals for a really long time is that when I was a little kid, I think, learning about dinosaurs, you're like, oh yeah, dinosaurs, ancient past, like they didn't live when humans lived. But then I think the thylacine was the first time that I was made aware of the fact that there were animals that could go extinct like now, like within human timeline. So I think maybe that was something that triggered a fascination in my brain or made me learn something when I was like 10 years old or whatever, that like extinction isn't just the past, like it's also now or could be now. And the way that the thylacine was introduced to me was that it was hunted to extinction also, which is it's like, whoa, there was like, whoa, like humans can do that to animals. I thought it was a meteor. I thought it was a big cataclysmic, space thing. I didn't think it was, we could do that, that kind of thing. So I think that was one thing that made me go like, whoa, like there's other animals that happens to. And so like, that was kind of an entry point for me. But then as I get older and I'm thinking about it and, being queer myself, there's like all of these things I can map onto it is interesting. So I don't know. I kind of joke too, like the thylacine is like, it's not like most furries, it's a thylacine, cause they're like, I did like all different communities online, like queer communities, fur communities, fandom in general. There's like sort of fandom around these charismatic animals.
Of course.
And I say that jokingly because it's sort of like being into wolves, but very specific. Even though they're not really,
very, very
excuse you, they're
specific.
not canines, excuse you, like that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that. So like maybe, I don't know, maybe in high school I was like, I want to be cool and be like, my favorite animal is a thylacine. It's like, not, no, it's not a wolf, it's different. I don't know. Maybe I was being like that, but
which is fine.
Yeah, whatever. But I don't know, it's come to mean a lot more to me. I mean, and then when you write a whole thesis about it, you learn a lot more than you ever thought you would about a thing. And so it's become part of, it's made accessible so many of these conversations about extinction and responsibility and the environment.
Hope.
And, not that I hadn't thought of before, but that made it really like tangible for me personally. So I think whether it's this like hopefulness that it symbolizes, or if it's the way that queerness and cryptids interact, because they're kind of goofy little fun things. I just want to be a little goofy guy, honestly.
All
I know
day.
you think I'm smart and I'm saying this stuff, but I'm also a really goofy guy. Okay.
Both things can coexist, Daisy, okay?
Yes, they coexist. Yeah, I think like the thylacine, has come to be part of all of that for me too. Yeah. So it's an easy way to talk about all of those either personal feelings or just awareness of the world as part of my learning about what it means to be a human on planet Earth, and like what our relationship to the environment is. And so I think for all of those reasons. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
There you go.
Well, then, do you believe the thylacine is a monster? Why or why not?
I don't know. I mean, that's a really hard. That's the hardest question so far, honestly. Sure. I was thinking about that too. I'm like, is it a monster? I think it maybe has been a monster, and it is being transformed from. It's being reclaimed. Maybe that's the way to think about it. Because like, there's a lot. The other thing that's interesting in the stories about the thylacine are that, there's the story you can tell about it historically as in terms of like what farmers and what, newspapers published about the thylacine as being, a harm to agriculture or whatever. There's actually not that many instances of that. Somehow that just became that narrative kind of bubbled to the surface, which I also think is really interesting too. There's less documentation of it at that time than people assume. But there's that narrative that it was harming, and then realizing that through science and data and in its extinction that actually wasn't the case. So there's sort of like a reclamation of like changing it from being threatening to not threatening, and that it's sad and it's cute and it's like we lost man's best friend. That's sort of how people talk about it today. But at that time, people were like, "Oh, it's a horrible, pest that is taking our livestock. It's like a wolf. It's like going to hurt people. We don't know what it is. We're just settlers, whatever." So I think that there's an interesting like changing of the narrative too. So I don't actually know if it's still a monster. I think it was a monster, definitely for a lot of people, and then it's been reclaimed. Maybe in a similar way other cryptids have, like Mothman caused harm, and people today talk about how sexy he is. So I don't know, like
it's safety for people.
Yeah, I wonder if there's and some of that's sort of like insider or like localized community versus like outside community versus internet versus pop culture, whatever. But I think that maybe the thylacine has been reclaimed as maybe not as monstrous as it once was. Now it's sort of oh, that's sad. We were calling it a monster, and it wasn't. Maybe we should listen to that. Maybe we should think about how something is a monster. So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question. Okay. Unfortunately, Daisy, it's a super analytical, super academic question. If you're just chilling, right? In Columbus, right? You're just having a great day on a Saturday, eating
just chilling,
some delicious food, drinking some water. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. You open it. You're like, oh my gosh, it's a thylacine. What would you do?
I would scream. I would scream, but like out of joy, I would be shocked. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I would be like, what? I'd be like, I gotta rewrite some stuff.
Hold on.
I don't know. Well, I gotta write some stuff. No, I think I would be overjoyed. I don't know if I would tell anyone though. That's the one thing. Sometimes people ask, like, if you found a thylacine, like, what would you do? What would you do if you've seen a thylacine? Would you report it? Would you not say anything? Who would you tell and why and when? And for a lot of people who have seen cryptids or have had alien encounters or have had these sort of supernatural experiences with non-humans, they don't know whether or not they should tell people because they're told that they're crazy, right? They're totally dismissed. They're not believed, which is I think that's another element of, I don't know, negotiating this like relationship with queerness too. Like, oh, you're not really that. It's just a phase, whatever. As like another example. But if I ever found a thylacine, like some people who are trying to find the sightings to prove the thylacine exists, they want it to exist because they want the state to stop logging. If they want to use it like symbolically or rhetorically, they're like, hey, if he's here, if the thylacine is here, don't log. You can't keep removing their location. So anyway, so some people want it like to be known. If the thylacine were ever to be found like 100% like verifiable, here is the body, it would destroy, like it would cause a fucking uproar in Australia and Tasmania. It would just, I don't even know. I know that there are people, including scientists, who have some suggestions of like contingency plans if that were ever to happen.
Sure.
But I think most people stop at like, damn, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Where does it live? Would it be in captivity? Would it be in the wild? You found it in the wild. Are you going to displace it? Are you going to make an area? Are you, how many people would be fucking poaching that, animal immediately if you told people? Like, that's the thing. It's like, there's so much, it's almost like I hope it's never found because of all of the harm that would be caused inevitably, again, by humans, no matter what choice it was. No matter what, if the choice was under the guise of like helping the animal or killing the animal, like there's no good outcome for me. Like, I don't see that. Like, I just, I don't know. I don't think that humans could just let it be. So if we ever found one, I would say if I specifically found a thylacine at my doorstep, I would say, run away. I hope you're a hallucination. I don't know. Maybe that's what I would say. Maybe I would invite it in and it could just be my little guy. I don't know.
Speaking like a true dinosaur kid. Daisy.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to just be my little guy. I don't know. There are recorded instances of people having thylacines as pets. Wow. Like colonial, like menageries, which is like sort of a predecessor to the zoo. Some people had thylacines as pets. And like, I think that they're not stupid. Like, they're responsive enough. I don't know if they were ever documented as being trained like a dog, but they're kind of benign scavenger type animals. So they wouldn't, it wasn't like I don't know. They could make good pets. We didn't get to see that long of that. That possibility. Right. Not that I would have wanted that anyway, but like, I'm trying to think of like I had lived with the thylacine. I don't know
what that would be like.
Yeah, I don't know. I have lots of small like examples of thylacine art, but I wonder like how the physical presence of it would change the space. Like, I wonder how big would it be? Like, there's lots of examples of like there's sort of like medium-sized dog, but I don't know, it would feel different.
Exactly.
Their tails all stocky. I don't know. Maybe it would like, I don't. The tails don't wag. It'd be kind of weird.
Don't
It'd
think
be a weird guy.
Anyway.
Yeah. They're not like dogs. They're different. So maybe that would be an interesting like renegotiation of space and learning how to understand other animals and their pathways, what they would want to do in your house. I don't know. I would either be like, run away, or I hope you're a hallucination, or
a big hug and you live
a huge little cuddly hug and he's my little guy. Yeah, like that's two different ways that I think I would confront the thylacine if they jumped at my door.
This episode of Floaties for Krakens was written and recorded by me, Camille Maria Costa. A monstrous thank you to Daisy Ahlstone for such a fantastic interview. A big thank you to Michael Kosman for producing such a stellar episode. And a huge thank you to Natalie Hedberg for designing such a phenomenal logo. And music for the show is also written and produced by me, with a special appearance by my tata, Toby Acosta. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's show. It truly means the world to me. If you have questions or curiosities about the research or media referenced in today's episode, everything will hopefully be in the description box. And you can find us on our website and our socials, links in the descriptions as well. Anyway, thanks again for being here, everyone. And just a reminder, it's okay to be afraid of the monster, but it's also okay to love the heck out of it too. Keep being monstrous and keep shining bright.